The silver needle caught the lamplight as Eleanor Ashford threaded it with practiced precision. Her fingers steady despite the tremor in her chest. Across the small sitting room of Thornwood Manor, Lord Adrian Blackwood reclined in the leather chair by the fire. His shirt collar loosened to reveal the angry gash across his collarbone. The third such wound in as many weeks. "You must be more careful during your evening rides," Eleanor murmured, dipping a clean cloth into the basin of warm water beside her. "These roads are treacherous in darkness." Adrian's pale fingers curled around the chair's armrest, his knuckles whitening. Not from pain, Eleanor assumed, but from the same stoic pride that kept him from crying out when she cleaned the deepest cuts. She had come to admire that quality in the months since her aunt had sent her to serve as companion to the reclusive lord, though she wished he would show more sense in avoiding whatever caused these injuries. "The darkness does not trouble me," he said, his voice carrying that peculiar resonance that made her think of cathedral bells. "It is the light I must be wary of." Eleanor pressed the warm cloth to his skin, watching the dried blood dissolve into russet streams. His flesh was cold beneath her touch, always cold, no matter how close he sat to the fire. She had attributed it to poor circulation, perhaps some lingering illness from his youth. Lord Blackwood was not yet 40, but something in his bearing suggested a soul that had witnessed far more than his years should allow. "There," she said softly, examining the wound. It was deep, the edges ragged as though torn by claws. "This will need stitching, my lord? I fear it may scar." "All wounds scar, Miss Ashford." His eyes, that extraordinary shade between silver and smoke, fixed upon her face. "Some simply hide their marks better than others." She threaded the needle through his skin with gentle efficiency, each stitch small and precise. Her mother had taught her the art before consumption had claimed her, leaving Eleanor and her younger sister dependent upon their aunt's grudging charity. This position at Thornwood Manor was a blessing, despite its peculiarities. Lord Blackwood paid well and asked little beyond her presence each evening, when he would return from his mysterious rides bearing fresh injuries that he dismissed with elegant evasion. "You have a tender hand," Adrian observed, watching her work with an intensity that made heat rise to her cheeks. "Most would not take such care with a stranger's wounds." "You are not a stranger, my lord. I have been in your household for 4 weeks now." 4 weeks and 3 days. The precision of his answer startled her, and he seemed to realize it, for he added quickly, "I keep careful account of my household expenses." Eleanor tied off the final stitch and reached for the jar of salve she had prepared that morning, a mixture of comfrey and calendula that her mother swore promoted healing. As she smoothed it across his skin, she felt him tense beneath her fingertips. "You need not do this every night," Adrian said, his voice rougher than usual. "I am certain you have other duties that require your attention." "My aunt sent me here to be of service, my lord. If tending your wounds is how I may be useful, then I am content." She met his gaze directly, something in his expression compelling honesty. "Besides, I worry what might become of these injuries if left unattended. Infection is a terrible thing." Something flickered across his features, guilt, perhaps, or sorrow. He looked away, toward the fire that cast dancing shadows across the book-lined walls. "You are kind to concern yourself with my welfare, Miss Ashford. Kinder than I deserve." Kindness is not a matter of deserving, my lord. It is simply what we owe one another as fellow creatures sharing this world. Adrian's hand moved suddenly, catching hers before she could withdraw. His fingers were indeed cold, but his grip was gentle, almost reverent. You believe that? Truly, I do. Eleanor's pulse beat against her collarbone like a trapped moth. Not from fear, but from the strange electricity that seemed to arc between their joined hands. Every soul deserves compassion, regardless of their circumstances or past mistakes. Even monsters, Miss Ashford. The question emerged as barely more than a whisper. Even those who have committed acts that would horrify you. She studied his face. The sharp beauty of his features. The ancient sadness in his eyes. The way he held himself apart from the world, as though afraid his very presence might contaminate it. I do not believe in monsters, my lord. Only in people who have lost their way and need help finding the path back to light. Adrian released her hand abruptly, rising from the chair with fluid grace despite his injury. He moved to the window, pulling back the heavy velvet curtain to gaze out at the moonlit grounds. You are remarkably naive for a woman of 25. 26, she corrected, gathering her supplies with mouths that trembled slightly. And perhaps I am naive, my lord. But I would rather be naive and compassionate than cynical and cruel. He turned back to her, and in the moonlight streaming through the window, his face seemed almost luminous, as though lit from within by some otherworldly source. What if I told you that these wounds you tend so carefully each night heal within hours of your departure? That by morning no trace of them remains? Eleanor paused in her tidying, considering his words. Then I would say you are blessed with a remarkable constitution, my lord, and that you must be very lonely to injure yourself deliberately, simply to have company in the evening. The silence that followed was so profound she could hear the pop and hiss of the fire, the distant hoot of an owl in the gardens beyond. Adrian stared at her as though she had struck him. You think I harm myself? His voice was hoarse with something that might have been anguish. I think you are in pain, my lord. Not physical pain, that you bear with remarkable fortitude, but the pain of isolation, of believing yourself unworthy of human connection. She set down the basin and moved toward him, emboldened by the raw vulnerability in his expression. I think you return each night with wounds that give you an excuse to accept care you believe you do not deserve. And I think, perhaps, you have been alone for far too long. Adrian's hand rose to his face, covering his eyes. His shoulders shook with what might have been laughter or tears. When he finally looked at her again, his expression was stripped of all pretense, revealing a depth of loneliness that made her chest ache. You are wrong, Miss Ashford. And yet you are also more right than you can possibly understand. He moved closer, and she caught the scent of him, night air and old books, and something indefinably other. The wounds are real. I acquire them in service of protecting this estate and its surroundings from threats you cannot imagine. But you are correct that they heal with supernatural speed. By dawn, they will be gone. As though they never existed. Supernatural. Eleanor's rational mind rebelled against the word, even as her intuition whispered that she had always known there was something extraordinary about Lord Blackwood. I am not what I appear, Miss Ashford. I am not entirely human, though I was born as one centuries ago. He watched her face carefully, as though expecting horror or disbelief. I am what folklore calls a vampire, though the reality is far less dramatic than the stories suggest. I do not kill, nor do I prey upon the innocent. I sustain myself on animal blood and dedicate my existence to protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Eleanor's first instinct was to laugh at the absurdity of the claim. Her second was to flee. But as she looked into Adrian's eyes, those strange, timeless eyes, she found herself rooted in place by a certainty that defied logic. She thought of his cold skin, his aversion to daylight, the way he moved with inhuman grace. The pieces assembled themselves into a picture that should have been impossible, but somehow made perfect sense. "Show me," she whispered. Adrian's expression shifted to one of profound shock. "Show you? If what you say is true, show me. Let me see the wound heal." He studied her for a long moment, then slowly unbuttoned his shirt to reveal the stitched gash across his collarbone. Eleanor watched, her lungs locked mid-draw in her throat, as the edges of the wound began to knit together before her eyes. The torn flesh mended itself with impossible speed, the stitches she had so carefully placed pushing out as new skin formed beneath them. Within minutes, only a faint pink line remained, and even that faded to nothing as she stared. "Dear God," she breathed, reaching out to touch the unmarred skin. It was smooth and cold beneath her fingertips, perfect as though no blade had ever touched it. "Now you understand why I said you were too kind," Adrian said quietly. "I have allowed you to waste your time and skill on wounds that required no tending. I have been selfish, Miss Ashford. Selfish and weak, because those moments when you cared for me were the only times in centuries that I have felt truly human." Eleanor's hand remained pressed against his chest, feeling the absence of a heartbeat that should have terrified her, but somehow did not. "You allowed me to help you because you needed to be helped. Not physically, but in the way that all lonely souls need to be seen and valued by another." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "There is no selfishness in that, my lord. Only a very human need for connection." "I am not human," he said. But his voice lacked conviction. "You are more human than many who still draw breath." Eleanor stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "You protect others at cost to yourself. You feel guilt and shame and loneliness. You crave kindness and companionship. These are not the qualities of a monster, Lord Blackwood. They are the qualities of a good man who has been alone far too long." Adrian's hand rose to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. "You should fear me, Miss Ashford. You should flee this house and never return." "Should I?" Eleanor's heart raced, but not with fear. "And yet I find I have no desire to do so. Strange, is it not, how the heart knows things the mind cannot explain?" "Eleanor." Her name on his lips was a prayer and a warning. "I am dangerous, not because I wish to harm you, but because I want nothing more than to keep you here, to have you near me always. That desire itself is a form of monstrousness." "Is it monstrous to want companionship? To hope for understanding?" She placed her hand over his, where it rested against her cheek. "You have been punishing yourself for centuries, my lord. Perhaps it is time to accept that you might deserve forgiveness, that you might deserve happiness." "I have done terrible things, Eleanor. In my early years, before I learned control, I caused suffering that haunts me still. And you have spent how many years atoning? How many lives have you saved in your nightly patrols? She saw the answer in his eyes. Redemption is not achieved through endless self-flagellation, my lord. It is achieved through choosing each day to be better than you were. And from what I have seen, you have made that choice for a very long time. Adrian pulled her closer, his forehead coming to rest against hers. You make me believe in possibilities I thought lost to me forever. You make me remember what it was to hope. Then hope, my lord? Eleanor's voice was steady, despite the tears that now tracked down her cheeks. Hope that you might be loved not despite what you are, but inclusive of all that you are. Hope that loneliness need not be your eternal companion. You speak of love. His breath was cool against her lips. Do you understand what you are saying? I understand that I have come to care for you deeply in these weeks. I understand that your nature, now revealed, does not diminish that care, but rather illuminates why you have needed it so desperately. She drew back enough to meet his eyes fully. I understand that I am not afraid of you, Adrian Blackwood. I am only afraid that you will send me away to protect me from a danger that does not exist. The danger is very real, he insisted, but his arms were around her now, holding her as though she were something precious and fragile. I could hurt you without meaning to. My strength is far greater than any mortal man's. And yet you hold me now with perfect gentleness. You have never once caused me harm, even accidentally. Eleanor rested her head against his chest, listening to the silence where a heartbeat should have been. I trust you, my lord. Perhaps, more than I have ever trusted anyone. Adrian's arms tightened around her, and she felt a tremor run through his frame. I do not deserve such trust. Deserving's not the point. The point is that I give it freely, as a gift. You need only choose whether to accept it. For a long moment, they stood locked in that embrace, the fire crackling softly behind them. Then Adrian spoke, his voice rough with emotion. There are others like me, a small community that exists in the shadows of society, trying to live with honor despite our cursed nature. If you were to accept me, to accept this life, you would become part of that hidden world. Would I become as you are? Eleanor asked, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. Not unless you chose it, and not for many years. The transformation is not something undertaken lightly. It requires mutual consent and deep emotional connection. He pulled back to look at her. But even as a mortal among immortals, you would be forever changed. You could never return to ordinary society, never speak of what you know. I have no great love for ordinary society, my lord. It has shown me little kindness since my parents' deaths. Eleanor managed a small smile. Besides, I find I am far more intrigued by extraordinary society, particularly if it includes you. A sound escaped Adrian that might have been a laugh or a sob. You are remarkable, Eleanor Ashford. Truly remarkable. I am practical, she corrected. I see before me a good man who has suffered long enough. I see an opportunity for connection that transcends the ordinary. And I see, perhaps, the answer to prayers I did not know I was praying. What prayers were those? For purpose, for belonging, for someone who might see me as I truly am and value what they find, sure. She reached up to touch his face, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "I have been invisible for so long, my lord. A poor relation, a companion, a servant. But when you look at me, I feel seen. I feel real." Adrian turned his head to press a kiss to her palm, his lips cool and soft. "You are the most real thing in my existence, Eleanor. You are light in centuries of darkness. You are hope when I had forgotten what hope felt like. Then let me continue to be those things. Let me stay, not as your employee, but as your companion in truth. Let me help you remember your humanity, and perhaps in doing so I will discover my own strength." "It will not be easy," Adrian warned. "There are dangers you cannot yet imagine. Other vampires who do not share my scruples. Hunters who would destroy us both if they learned what I am. The constant vigilance required to maintain the secret." "I am not afraid of difficulty, my lord. I am only afraid of regret, of looking back on this moment and wishing I had been brave enough to choose the extraordinary over the safe." Adrian's hand slid into her hair, cradling her head with exquisite tenderness. "If I allow myself to love you, and God help me, I fear it is already too late to prevent it. I will love you with an intensity that mortals cannot comprehend. I will love you for decades, for centuries, if you choose transformation. I will love you with every fiber of my cursed being until the stars themselves burn out." "That," Eleanor whispered, her eyes shining, "sounds perfectly acceptable to me." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like she had imagined a kiss might be. His lips were cool, but impossibly gentle, moving against hers with a reverence that made her feel cherished beyond measure. There was no demand in it, no urgency, only a profound tenderness that spoke of centuries of loneliness finally finding its end. When they parted, Eleanor was breathless despite the chaste nature of the kiss. Adrian rested his forehead against hers once more. His eyes closed as though savoring the moment. "I will speak to the others," he said quietly. "There are protocols, ways of introducing a mortal to our world safely. You will need to meet them, to understand what you are truly accepting." "When?" Eleanor asked, practical even in the midst of such momentous emotion. "Soon. Perhaps this very week, if you are certain of your choice." "I am certain." She had never been more certain of anything in her life. Adrian opened his eyes, and in them she saw centuries of pain beginning to ease, replaced by the something that looked remarkably like joy. "Then we shall face whatever comes together. You and I, mortal and immortal, bound by something stronger than either life or death." "Love," Eleanor said simply. "Yes." Adrian's smile was transformative, making him look almost boyish despite his ancient eyes. "Love. I had forgotten how powerful a force it could be. Thank you, my dear Eleanor, for reminding me." 3 nights later, Eleanor found herself in the drawing room of a townhouse in London, surrounded by the most extraordinary gathering she had ever witnessed. There were perhaps a dozen individuals present, all of them possessing the same ethereal beauty and timeless quality as Adrian. They regarded her with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern, but none showed hostility. "This is highly irregular, Adrian," said a woman who introduced herself as Lady Catherine Wentworth. She appeared to be in her 30s, though Eleanor suspected her true age was measured in centuries. "We do not typically reveal ourselves to mortals. Miss Ashford is not a typical mortal," Adrian replied, his hand resting protectively on Eleanor's shoulder. She discovered my nature through her own perception and accepted it without fear. She has proven herself worthy of our trust. An elderly gentleman, or rather a vampire who appeared elderly, leaned forward in his chair. The question is not whether she is worthy of our trust, but whether we can guarantee her safety. Knowledge of our existence puts her at risk from those who would exploit such information. I understand the risks, sir, Eleanor said, finding her voice. Lord Blackwood has explained them thoroughly. I accept them willingly. And what do you hope to gain from this association, Miss Ashford? Lady Catherine's tone was not unkind, merely cautious. Immortality, wealth, power, companionship, Eleanor answered honestly. I hope to gain the companionship of someone who sees me as I am and values what he finds. I hope to offer the same in return. As for immortality, that is a choice for the distant future, if at all. For now, I am content to be mortal among immortals, if you will have me. A younger-looking vampire, introduced as Thomas Aldridge, laughed softly. She is either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish. I cannot decide which perhaps both, Eleanor allowed with a small smile. But I would rather be brave and foolish than cowardly and safe. Lady Catherine studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. If Adrian vouches for you, and if you understand the gravity of your choice, then we welcome you to our circle, Miss Ashford. You will be under our protection, but you must also abide by our rules. Chief among them, absolute secrecy regarding our nature. You have my word, my lady. Then let us drink to new beginnings, the elderly gentleman said, raising a glass of what appeared to be wine, but which Eleanor suspected was something quite different. May they bring joy to all involved. The gathering continued for several hours, during which Eleanor learned more about vampire society than she had imagined possible. They were not the monsters of folklore, but rather individuals trying to live with honor despite their unusual circumstances. They protected mortals from genuine threats, rogue vampires who had lost their humanity, supernatural creatures that preyed on the innocent, and human villains whose crimes might otherwise go unpunished. We are guardians, Adrian explained as they rode back to Thornwood Manor in his carriage. It is how we atone for what we are, for the curse that was inflicted upon us. We use our strength and immortality in service of those who cannot defend themselves. It is noble work, Eleanor said, nestling against his side. The night was cold, but his presence beside her made her feel safe and warm despite his own chill. I am proud to be associated with it, even in a small way. Your association need not be small. There is much you could do to help us if you wished. Mortals can move in daylight, can access places and information that we cannot. You could be invaluable. Eleanor considered this, feeling a spark of excitement at the prospect. I would like that very much. To have purpose beyond tending a household, to make a real difference in the world. It is more than I ever dared hope for. Adrian pressed a kiss to her temple. You have already made a difference, my love. You have given me back my humanity. You have reminded me why immortality might be a gift rather than a curse. That is no small thing. The weeks that followed were among the happiest of Eleanor's life. By day, she managed Thornwood Manor and began learning the skills she would need to assist Adrian's work. Codes and ciphers, observation techniques, the art of gathering information without arousing suspicion. By night, she accompanied Adrian on his patrols, when it was safe to do so, witnessing firsthand the good he did in protecting the surrounding countryside. She also continued to tend his wounds each night, though now she understood the truth behind them. Still, Adrian never stopped her, never suggested that her ministrations were unnecessary. He would sit patiently while she cleaned and stitched, his eyes following her movements with an expression of profound contentment. "Why do you still allow me to do this?" Eleanor asked one evening as she threaded her needle. "You know the wounds will heal within hours." Adrian caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Because those moments when you care for me are sacred, my love. They remind me that I am worthy of tenderness, that I am more than the monster I sometimes fear I have become. Your touch heals wounds far deeper than these superficial cuts. It heals the damage done to my soul by centuries of isolation." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "You are not a monster, Adrian. You never were." "Perhaps not, but I needed you to show me that truth. I needed your acceptance, your compassion, your love." He drew her close, his arms encircling her with infinite care. "You have given me back my life, Eleanor. You have made eternity seem not like a burden, but like a gift, because I will have you beside me for as long as you choose to stay." "I choose forever," Eleanor whispered against his chest. "However long my mortal life lasts, and perhaps beyond, if that is what we decide together. I choose you, Adrian Blackwood. I choose this extraordinary life over any ordinary alternative." "Then I'm the most fortunate creature in existence," Adrian murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Mortal or immortal, living or undead, there is no one in all the world as blessed as I am in this moment." They were married 6 months later in a private ceremony attended by both mortal and immortal witnesses. Eleanor wore her mother's pearls and a gown of ivory silk, and Adrian stood beside her in formal attire that made him look like a prince from a fairy tale. Lady Catherine performed the ceremony, invoking both mortal vows and the deeper, more ancient promises that bound vampire to mortal in eternal partnership. "You understand that this bond transcends death itself?" Lady Catherine asked Eleanor solemnly. "That should you choose transformation in the future, you will be bound to Adrian not just for a mortal lifetime, but for all eternity." "I understand," Eleanor replied, her voice steady and sure. "And I accept that bond with joy and gratitude." "Then by the power vested in me by both mortal law and immortal tradition, I pronounce you husband and wife. May your love be a light in the darkness, now and forever." Adrian kissed her then, before all their assembled witnesses, and Eleanor felt the truth of Lady Catherine's words. This was more than a marriage. It was a binding of souls that transcended the boundaries between life and death, mortal and immortal, human and other. The years that followed were rich with purpose and love. Eleanor became an invaluable member of the vampire community, using her mortal status to gather information and provide assistance that her immortal companions could not. She helped Adrian protect countless innocents, prevented disasters that would have devastated communities, and found in that work a sense of fulfillment she had never known existed. But more than that, she found in Adrian a partner who cherished her completely. He never took her presence for granted, never ceased to marvel at her courage and compassion. And she, in turn, never tired of reminding him of his own worth, of the goodness that existed at his core, despite the curse he bore. On their 10th anniversary, as they stood together in the gardens of Thornwood Manor, beneath a canopy of stars, Adrian broached the subject they had carefully avoided for years. "Eleanor, my love, we must speak of the future." She knew immediately what he meant. At 36, she was still healthy and strong, but the first silver threads had begun to appear in her dark hair. The question of transformation could not be postponed indefinitely. "I have been thinking about it as well," she admitted, lacing her fingers through his. "And I believe I have reached a decision." Adrian's expression was carefully neutral, though she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Whatever you choose, I will support you. If you wish to live out your natural span as a mortal, I will treasure every moment we have together. If you wish transformation, I will guide you through it with all the love and care I possess." Eleanor turned to face him fully, taking both his hands in hers. "I choose transformation, my love. Not because I fear death, but because I am not yet finished with this extraordinary life we have built together. There is still so much good we can do, so many people we can help, and selfishly, I find I am not ready to leave you. Not after a mere 10 years, not after 100 years, perhaps not ever." The relief that flooded Adrian's features was profound. "You are certain? The transformation is painful, and there is no reversing it once begun." "I am certain." Eleanor smiled up at him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "You have spent 10 years showing me that immortality need not be a curse. You have shown me that it can be a gift if one chooses to use it wisely. I am ready to accept that gift, Adrian. I am ready to stand beside you, not just for a mortal lifetime, but for all the centuries to come." Adrian pulled her close, his embrace fierce with emotion. "Then we shall face eternity together, my brave, beautiful Eleanor. We shall be guardians together, partners in all things, bound by a love that neither time nor death can diminish. Together." Eleanor agreed, and in that single word was a promise that transcended all others. A vow, though, that would endure through centuries yet to come. A commitment that would outlast empires and ages. The transformation took place on the winter solstice, in the presence of Lady Catherine and the other elders of their community. It was indeed painful, as Adrian had warned, but Eleanor bore it with the same quiet courage she had shown throughout their courtship. And when she emerged 3 days later, her eyes now carrying that same timeless quality as Adrian's, she felt not diminished, but expanded, as though she had finally become the fullest version of herself. "How do you feel?" Adrian asked, his voice hushed with wonder as he gazed at his newly immortal wife. Eleanor took his hand, marveling at how she could now feel the subtle currents of energy that flowed through him, the ancient power that animated his undead form. "I feel alive," she said, and laughed at the irony. "More alive than I ever did as a mortal. I feel ready, my love, ready for whatever adventures await us." "Then let us begin," Adrian said, and kissed her with a passion that spoke of centuries of devotion yet to come. And so they did. Together they walked into their shared future, no longer separated by the boundary between mortal and immortal, but united in purpose and bound by a love that had already proven itself stronger than death. They would face challenges in the years to come, dangers and difficulties that would test them both, but they would face them together as they had always done, drawing strength from the connection that had begun with Eleanor's gentle hands tending wounds that did not need tending, and Adrian's lonely heart finally finding the courage to accept the love it had been offered. In the end, that was the true miracle. Not the supernatural healing or the gift of immortality, but the simple, profound truth that two souls had found each other across the divide between life and death, and had chosen to build something beautiful in the space between. That was the magic that sustained them through all the centuries that followed. The light that guided them through darkness. The hope that made eternity not a burden but a blessing. And every night, even though there were no longer any wounds to tend, Eleanor would still take Adrian's hand in hers and hold it with the same gentle care she had shown that first evening at Thornwood Manor. It was their ritual, their reminder of how their love had begun, with compassion offered freely, with kindness given without expectation of return, with two lonely souls recognizing in each other the possibility of home.